Well, if the mainstream media and big pharma have their way, we're all going to be convinced about how safe and effective vaccines are. We'll tear away our religious exemptions. Due to whatever outbreak is being propagated on the news. The first patient diagnosed with Ebola has been confirmed here in the U.S. There is another enterovirus that has been spreading across the country. It's already claimed the life of one child today in Rhode Island. And now there is another mosquito-borne virus that's making its way up from Latin America, and it could be a problem for the U.S. here shortly. But now this mosquito has a viral disease of its own. That the UN announced plans to combat dengue fever and other mosquito-borne illnesses with genetically modified mosquitoes. There was very little debate about meddling with nature by introducing billions of new organisms into the system. Kind of like there has been very little debate about bringing patients with Ebola into America. Seems a little crazy unless that's your plan, is to bring Ebola into the country. Of course, that is a secret CIA mind control program, and in this particular instance with the mosquito, they were seeking to find ways to spread a virus that could be an incapacitant, not necessarily something that would be deadly for a population, but something that would, of course, destabilize a region. But it's getting more and more like 1984 every single day. Parents who dare question the science behind vaccines and who want to, maybe learn about protecting their children are ridiculed. And we have Australia now threatening to take away some of the welfare benefits of those parents who refuse to vaccinate their children. But the fact is, the science is not settled. And that's why we have an ongoing, heated vaccine debate for decades. The science is not settled. Now, my guest here today has fought for years to get the truth out about vaccines and just offer parents an alternative and even an alternative education and to what's being pumped out consistently through the mainstream media. So, Dr. Wakefield, thank you for joining us. So talk to me a little bit about this Give Autism a Chance Summit. Why do you think it's so important for people to see real people with, some real solutions?
Well, thank you for having me, and it is a fantastic studio, absolutely wonderful. This is a conference that's taking place on Saturday here in Austin at the Westin at the Domain, so a very nice hotel, great lineup. It's about we weren't going to do this again. We did it last year. It was a tremendous success. We said we're never going to do that again. It's far too much work, and here we are 1 year on doing it all over again. and it's going to be an equal success this year. So it's about getting information to the people about how autism is a medical disease, how we need to approach it from a medical perspective. How children can be recovered, the extent to which they can be recovered. Therapists, nutritionists, physicians, nursing staff. Everybody's going to be there discussing in a very open exchange format the way forward for autism. How to get solutions for children. And for families. So one of the very exciting panel is going to be the sibling panel. So little attention is paid to siblings. They get kind of sidelined as all of the attention goes to the child with autism. Necessarily because they're so sick. And they demand such time and effort, but now we have the siblings speaking out and saying what it's like to be growing up in a family with a sibling who's autistic, and these are wonderful, wonderful kids. They are so empathetic, so caring, and they're going to get up there and have their own special panel.
Wow.
To discuss what it's like being a sibling with advice for other siblings. And you're not alone. That's the message.
Yeah.
You are not alone. So that's a wonderful thing that takes place. Then we've got another panel, which is my panel. That's the whistleblower panel. And this is talking about the CDC whistleblower, Dr. William Thompson, coming forth with the revelation that they have known for 13 years that MMR vaccine is causally associated with autism. And they've covered it up. They have hidden it. So the people who were charged with caring for the children of this country have been concealing evidence of harm. And that is the utmost hypocrisy that needs to be exposed. We've got ex-Congressman David Weldon, a physician himself, who was in Congress for many years and sat as a guest on the Oversight Committee panels on the vaccine issue, who tried to introduce the Weldon-Maloney bill to get vaccine safety science right out of the CDC. Away from the people who are so conflicted. They have a $4 billion a year budget for purchasing vaccines. Their success is judged by vaccine uptake, and yet they're in charge of safety monitoring. It's a nonsense. Right. You don't have Boeing investigating plane crashes. And nor should you have the CDC investigating vaccine safety. So there are going to be some great people there, lots of information. What happens next? What happens about the revelations of the whistleblower? How do we get Congress to haul these people in front of them and demand answers? Is there a legal case against the individuals? Is there individual accountability so that a parent whose child was damaged when they had this knowledge, and had that parent had the knowledge they would not have vaccinated, does that parent have legal redress against the individuals, not the CDC, but the individuals who committed the frauds? So these are the kinds of questions that we're going to be asking.
Now, why do you think there is such a veracity, like a voraciousness with which the media tries to shut down any alternative points of view that, you know, maybe vaccines do cause autism? Or maybe there are some other alternative treatments for autism. And we need to look at this as a medical issue. Why do you think there's such a pushback?
But I think the answer is staring us in the face. And I say this not because it's my supposition. It's because journalists have said this to me themselves. And it's because the pharmaceutical industry own the media. They own the network media, they own the print media, they own the magazines, they pay a lot of dollars in advertising revenues. And they basically write the agenda. They write the script. They write the script for people like Anderson Cooper on this issue. And that's what happens in mainstream media. They're never going to cover it. And HHS have said themselves under Sebelius, do not give equal coverage to the other side of the argument. Okay, so you're not going to get the truth in the mainstream media. You'll get it on this show, and you'll get it in a number of alternative media outlets. You will not get it in mainstream media because they are owned.
Right, exactly. And even on shows like The Kelly File on Fox Network, you know, she does a really good job a lot of the time. But here we'll actually play a clip of her, and she's speaking about a doctor, but she never says the doctor's name, and she never talks about what specific case studies and things that what sort of scientific evidence was disputed and shut down. But you see, even the way she speaks, it's in such a way that anyone who would even think about trying to look up this unnamed doctor is just a fool. So let's take a look at that clip.
In defense of those who have not vaccinated their children, they were given bad information years ago by a UK study that came out in 1998.
But that is good information.
But now there's good information.
Do you oppose mandatory vaccinations for the children?
No.
And so that's just one example here. They're so afraid to even say your name. Because they know people are going to go online, they're going to do a little research for themselves. There are plenty of parents out there who aren't just willing to take that mainstream media narrative. You know, these are their children. That's their duty as a parent, is to know everything they can to protect their child. And again, we're finding out how the studies have been fibbed. Or here we have, you know, American taxpayers have paid out more than $2 billion, I think more than that at this point, $2 billion in vaccine lawsuits. They point out which vaccines have the highest win rate in court, you know. So this isn't, the science is not undisputed. Here we have an Italian court, I believe in 2014 of last year, paid for a young boy who had vaccine-related autism. So it's not undisputed. It's not a fact. It's not settled. So why do you think that they would force parents to inoculate their children?
Well, this number now, as you say, it now approaches $3 billion in payouts to people who've been vaccine damaged. And many, many of those are children who've had an acute neurological injury that led to autism. So they've already acknowledged that vaccines cause autism. And it's just playing with words. It's a question not of whether it does happen. It's a question now of the body count, and the body count is far higher than they ever want to concede. And the reason they don't settle more of these cases is to acknowledge the true level of damage they believe would put people off vaccination. So the lie gets perpetuated and the injustice gets perpetuated. It's not a tragedy, and it's something we'll be discussing at the conference. Yes, you're right. In the court in Rimini awarded for MMR vaccine-induced autism last year. We've had at least 83 cases in this country where similar awards have been made, and they've been kept quiet. And they've been made for the last 30 years, but that's not the story that American parents are getting. They're safe and effective. No, they're not.
Yeah.
And William Thompson now comes forward and says they've faked the safety data. And in federal court, we have Merck being sued for fraudulently disguising the efficacy of their vaccine, their mumps vaccine. Costing the American taxpayers millions, putting children at risk because mumps in childhood is very safe. Child is relatively harmless. And in adults is not. And so what you do is you make people susceptible again. Your vaccine doesn't work. People become susceptible when they're adults, and the disease can be much, much worse. So this is not just a question of efficacy, of protection. It's a question of safety. Merck are in court over that at the moment. The judge refused to throw the case out, and they are going to go to trial. So the very plank of their argument, the very plank of what they're trying to push these mandates through state by state by state at the moment of safety and efficacy have both fallen away. They're both rotten, and they have no foundation. So these bills are dangerous. Not only do they inevitably violate the rights of parents, but they are frankly dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, California is now talking about doing away altogether with allowing parents to opt out of getting their children for the religious exemptions or what have you. I know a lot of other states are toying with this bill as well to just take away the power of the parent to make that decision for their children. You know, but I'm sitting right here with you, and like I can sense that you're very much at peace. I mean, even for a man, a doctor who's had his life's work and your name sort of dragged through the mud. You're at peace with your research and what you've done, and I feel like you know you're going to be vindicated.
Yes, vindication is a luxury that I really don't dwell upon very much. There is a much more important issue, and that is how to protect the children of this country from this extraordinary onslaught. And that has to happen. I look at, Nelson Mandela was in prison in solitary confinement for 27 years. I've only been in this fight for 20 years, and I still have my freedom. So I have no complaints, and if I might feel sorry for myself on occasions, then the next time I see a child with autism, I think I don't have a problem.
Right.
So it's a constant reminder of what the true issues are in this. It's not about me, it's not about that work that was done years ago. This is just a public relations rhetoric to try and dismiss the issue, when in fact they know it's real. They know, people at the highest levels know this is real. William Thompson told Gerberding, the head of the CDC, about these data, and she ignored him, and she went off to Merck on a huge salary to look after their vaccine division. So that is how insidiously dangerous and corrupt this system is, and that's what must be exposed. And I will not be going away until that happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible how whatever amount of money can be worth selling your soul. And, harming millions of the world's children and just being okay with that because you're going to get a golden parachute. at some point. And all of these people must realize that the truth will come out sooner or later, especially with the internet. As long as we can continue getting this information out there, so important. So are you aware of any, you mentioned that some of the things that we're going to be learning at this summit are some alternative therapies and things like that you mentioned.
Well, therapies that are now becoming more and more mainstream, gastrointestinal investigation and intervention in children with autism, one of the most consistent findings in research now in autism is the link with the bowel disease, a bowel disease that was described by us at the Royal Free way back in 1998. And tragically subverted because it was synonymous with vaccine injury, therefore it couldn't be true.
Mm.
How many children suffered, how many children were in pain for many, many years who could have been treated. Now that's coming to the forefront. And so dietary interventions, nutritional interventions, supplementation, all of these things to heal the child. And then allow other things like remedial therapies with applied behavioral analysis, behavioral interventions, to have their full effect, because if a child's in pain, they can't concentrate. But if they're physically well, then you'll get the most out of all of the other interventions that you use.
Isn't it amazing how it always goes back to the diet? I mean, that's the part of the Hippocratic Oath for doctors they have to take to know that it starts there with the diet, and yet now we're told really the only way you can find the healing is through these medicines. Which are mostly all plant-derived anyway. So it's just kind of interesting that it all sort of circles back around. And, you know, I'm really glad that that is something that's becoming more prevalent. And people do have an option. They do see that they're not alone. There are other people out there like them, and they don't have to be afraid. Is there anything you would want to say to parents out there who are maybe kind of feeling the pressure of their peers, or is there any resources for them?
Yes, you're not alone. Come to the summit, listen to the experts, and you will realize that not only are your instincts right, you're on the right track. But there are many others with you whose children have gained great benefits from that sort of intervention. So it's a painful learning process. Yes, it's largely based in treating the gut. And as a gastroenterologist, I find that perfectly acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And nutritional and dietary in origin. We are what we eat. And that was never more so, particularly in the face of things like GMO crops and pesticides.
Yeah.
So I think that parents should be reassured that this is actually becoming more and more mainstream. It's just that the mainstream has to be dragged kicking and screaming, not least of which it doesn't serve the pharmaceutical industry interests.
Right.
To have these so-called alternative but entirely natural treatments that are at hand.
Right, which people have to understand how heavy the hand of big pharma is in every sector, and especially the media. But then, of course, your schools, and then your doctors, and the advice. I mean, we have a story about a lawsuit that's going on right now. A nursing student saying that her college instructors were telling the students 2 particular ways that they could intimidate their patients into getting vaccines. Oh, well, if you don't get your vaccine, you're going to lose your Medicaid, and then you'll be responsible for all of your doctor bills. If you're a new father, you're not going to be able to see your newborn if you're not up to date on vaccines. And of course, you know, the shots you could never be immunized by the time, if they give you the shot, okay, now go in and see your baby. In fact, you're probably going to bring measles or something in there with your newborn baby who hasn't built up its immunity yet. And of course, we've also got a story that it just came out now that, in fact, Monsanto, these companies, they knew the dangers of glyphosate 30 years ago, and they covered up the science and how glyphosate was bad for your gastrointestinal and how it's being torn up. And now people are having all these, you know, celiac disease and things like that, or autism related diseases. So the fact that we can have a mainstream media really pushing that the science is here, I just feel like these people are all, they got the blood on their hands, you know?
Yeah, this is an absolute disgrace. I mean, vaccination policy, public health policy depends upon the public confidence. You have to have the trust of the public. What kind of system is it that coerces you by threatening you, by lying to you in this case, by making up lies about what you will lose?
Right.
Or in Australia now doing exactly that, taking away $11,000 worth of child benefits per year if you don't get fully vaccinated. What kind of coercion? That's not based on public confidence in vaccination policy. That's a disaster. You have lost the public. If that's what you have to do, if you have to force people to get vaccinated, you are on a road to nowhere.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Wakefield, thank you so much for joining us.